And hello, everyone. We're live on Facebook. We're streaming live. I'm Emil Guillermo, wearing my lucky vest today and my lucky tubao. You will recall that I have not been able to get a haircut, but it's coming. It's coming soon. It's coming soon because San Francisco has opened up its haircutting places. Before they said you can only do it outside, so it was sort of like a cabana haircut or something. But now they said, okay, we're coming in indoors too, which is really great. So let's see. Oh, I got to set up. We're behind the scenes here, so we're you're seeing me punch up the buttons because people say, oh, people want to see what's behind the scenes. That because it's like, oh, you're in on the secret. You're in the secret. You can see, everything that's going on. You can see what's happening. You can see me looking to make sure that we are in fact doing something live, and we are in fact doing something live. Doesn't it show up here? I think on the on my monitor it says that we're live. I'm gonna trust it. It says we're live on Facebook. And if in fact we are not live, someone who's out there might be someone out there. The churches aren't quite open yet, and if you are out there and you're saying, "Oh yeah, we're not, we don't see you, Emil," or maybe you'll say, "Yeah, we see you. Boy, we didn't realize you look like that." But no, this is the behind the scenes goings on here at on our Facebook Live, and we had an interesting Facebook Live event yesterday. We talked to Luna Gemero, and she sent me back some things about what she couldn't talk about, or what she didn't get around to talking about. And I don't know why, because I gave her an opportunity, but then it came up in her mind and she wanted to share it. And so we'll get into that. But for those of you who are still with us, of course, we just got here. You've got to still be with us. Thank you. Thank you for being here. We try to do these every Saturday and Sunday, where you check in with us, right? And we do these programs for you. We do these programs for you because, once again, like for the past 5 months, we've been shut down. And that is very disheartening, extremely disheartening. I just want to tell you, I became the museum director of the FANHS Museum in January, February, shut down in March. And we've been shut down ever since. And as a way to engage with you, our audience, we've just been waiting for them, for us to be opened up, but we're not open. We're not still be with us. Thank you for being here. We try to do these every, look at this, Saturday. This is part of the technical, for us to be open. This is part of the technical, but difficulty, not difficulty. It's we're not open. See, we're not still be with us. We're hearing a little. Thank you for being here. What is this here? We try to do these every. Oh, look at this. Saturday. Okay. This is part of the technical, for us to be open. This is part of the technical. This is the problem with my screen. Not difficulty. It's we're not open. See, we're not still be with us. We're hearing a little. Boy, now this is the story. We try to do these every. Oh, look at this. Saturday. Okay. This is part of the technical, for us to to be this open. This is the technical. This is the problem with my screen. Not difficulty. Wow. It's just we're not open. Really see, we're not still be with us. We're hearing a little. We're now feeding back. Wait, now this is the story. We try to do these every. Look at this. Saturday. Okay. This is part of the technical. For us to be this is part of the technical problem with my screen. Not difficulty. It's just we're not open. See, we're not still be with us. We're hearing a little. We're now wait, now this is the story. We try to do these every. Look at this. Saturday. This is part of the technical for us to be this is part of the technical problem with my screen. Not difficulty. My destiny. Okay, so there we go. So all right, so now we're better. Now I'm just back here. Oh my God, I can't believe that happened. I have a screen that you know how you have iPads that you can control with you can pinch, and I was pinching. Felt like my mom. It felt like my mom. She was pinching me, and and I was going, oh, all right. You know how that is, right? So I was pinching my screen, and it wasn't going anywhere. So, anyway, it's good to be here. We're vamping a little bit because we had a guest. Our guest was supposed to be, well, you can see on the screen, and he didn't call in. So that's all right. Something happened. I know he was due for some kind of surgery, so I imagine there must have been some kind of he's got an excuse. I'm sure he's got an excuse. But whatever, we're going to carry on with our program, somewhat truncated. Maybe without a guest, Emil, you can get us out of here under an hour. Well, maybe, but don't you like these little rap sessions we have? Because really, we're talking about Filipino history. We're talking about the stuff that gets us excited. So, all right, I was talking about my hair, right? I become more Filipino during this whole lockdown period, not just because I was named the director of the museum, but because what do? I had all these tubaos, and so I put them on my head, and I've got, I'm just proud to be able to wear them now. I have a function. My hair is so long, sort of like a sawed-off turban, but it's real and it's very Filipino, and I got them from. I think I got him from Thelma Buchholz. She used to have a little table at the FANHS conferences, and I'm sure I got at least 3 of them from her. Old Thelma Buchholz, who was the first Filipina legislator in the United States. And if you don't know her story, check out our videos. They're on Facebook Live at FANHS Museum Facebook Live. I talked to her daughter, Ty, and fascinating story about Thelma Buchholz, first Filipina legislator in the United States. She was part of the Alaska State House. So you can also catch it on YouTube. Oh, that's another announcement. All our videos here can also be seen on our YouTube channel, FANHS Museum YouTube channel. Check out our FANHS museum page for the links and the details. Okay, so today I was explaining how we do these things, these pop-ups, because we want to check in with each other. We want to check in with you. We know how important being Filipino is to you. We know how important Filipino American history is. So we have these virtual pop-ups, and we check in with each other. This is your way of catching up with the museum, our way of catching up with you. Put in your comments on the chat box below. Remember, what we like to say, you are historical. That's not a way us saying that you're old. No, you're not. You're historical. All of you, no matter what age you are. And, there's the common phrase, oh, we're living history. No, we're not living history. We're telling history. We're in an historical age, but we're telling history. And that's what we like to do here on these virtual pop-ups, talking about history, talking about us, because you're never going to see us very often. Not really. I mean, look at the things that had to be done, and I'm not even sure what stage we're at in terms of getting Filipino American history curricula in the here in California where we are. I know that it was being pushed and it was passed and it was all set to go. I think we're in some of the final stages of getting it actually into schools. But look at how long it's taken. And it was an initiative that was started by Rob Bonta, the first California state legislator of Filipino heritage. And that just happened within the last, 6 to 8 years. So it's important, this Filipino history. And that's why, look, I want to start this off by just reading a news story that you may have seen last week. Headline: Trump calls for patriotic education, says anti-racism teachings are child abuse. Our youth will be taught to love America with all of their heart and all of their souls, the president said. He's going to start a commission, apparently. Here's the thing about that. I'm not really criticizing the president. I'm not being political, but I'm making the case for what we do at the Filipino American National Historical Society Museum. We tell, we preserve, we collect, we share the Filipino American experience through Filipino American history. A lot of that is because our history is left off the books. And here's the president saying, you know what little histories are, we need to go back to this patriotic history. The patriotic history, what is that? Is that where Filipinos get left out again? So whatever comes out of this commission that the president has floated about, pay attention. Pay attention, because the reason why we were left out the first time is because we had the kind of patriotic history that didn't tell all the truth about the Spanish-American War or the U.S.-Philippine War. And how many people even know that there's a U.S.-Philippine War? And how many people still try to conflate the Spanish-American War and the U.S.-Philippine War, or the Philippine-American War, as some others call it? Conflate it, saying that it was all like one big thing. The U.S. buys the Philippines from Spain and then tries to conquer the Filipinos, first colony. No, it wasn't the same thing. They were contiguous to each other in terms of events, but don't conflate it like there's this one statue, and I've written about this. There's a statue called the Hiker, which tends to conflate both the Spanish-American War and the Philippine-American War. Like they weren't two separate entities. One where the U.S. came in and bought the Philippines from Spain. Okay, get rid of that. And the other where the Philippines declared independence and fought the U.S. tooth and nail for much longer than anyone thinks, with many more casualties than anyone thinks. Well, it was short-lived, the independence of the Philippines. America took over the colonial power. Is that patriotic? How about the details? How many people died? Has that often been put in the history books, or is that left out of patriotic American history? So I don't know exactly what Trump wants when he calls for patriotic education and when he says anti-racism teachings are child abuse. We're only interested in the truth. We're only interested in getting the information and the facts about Filipino American history to the people who might be enlightened by the fact that this is both Filipino and American history. Can't get more patriotic than that, I would think, right? So, check that out and follow that. Trump wants to start he plans to sign an executive order to create a national commission to support patriotic education called the 1776 Commission. Clearly kind of a some backlash at the 1619 project that the New York Times started, which told the truth about slavery. Truth is truth. And now we're seeing it kind of politicized, which is not a good thing for history. Not a good thing if you want the truth. So we're talking about that. I think that's an important thing to start off with, because this is what we do here. We also like to talk about this idea of this week in Filipino American history. Okay, so the Trump thing happened this week, but something else happened in Filipino American history this week that it just sort of struck me. I was supposed to go to dinner in Turlock yesterday to see some friends. I don't go out very much because of the COVID crisis. I don't go out and do much. I mean, I'm going to get a haircut, though. I am going to get a haircut next week. First time. I'm kind of scared about it, because I mean, I go to the grocery store like, once every 2 weeks or so, and then I stay here in my closet and talk to you on Zoom. Should I live my life? I'm living my life. This is the way I live my life with you about Filipino American history. Anyway, so I was supposed to go to Turlock last night. I said, no, I can't go. I'm not paranoid about COVID, but I had a little thing in my throat, and I just feel the need to stay quarantined and locked down. I'm thinking about them. Hey, there's your good excuse for being antisocial. I'm thinking about you. I don't want to infect you. And then this week in Filipino American history, September 17th, 1934, in Turlock, California, which is between Modesto and Fresno, the Night Riders, with baseball bats and clubs, warned Filipinos to get out of town. Violence erupting. September 17th, 1934 in Turlock. Now, what is that? The Night Riders. Night Riders were the precursors to the KKK. That's what they were. They were up and down the valley, all throughout the state. 1934, an anti-Filipino movement that was so strong. The anti-Filipino movement was developing, and we've talked about this in past shows, developing because there was a kind of an arrangement between people in high places in U.S. politics and the government in the Philippines saying, hey, look, we have this Filipino problem. We'll keep the Filipinos out. We'll repatriate them, and we'll give you your independence. And some people were willing to go with that. And it meant that in 1934, the Tidings-McDuffie Act was passed, which meant exclusion of Filipinos, the repatriation of the Filipinos who were here, and the change in status of Filipinos from U.S. nationals, no green card necessary, to aliens, if they could catch you. I mean, you're reclassified as aliens, but for some reason, I don't know exactly the details with my dad, who came in 1928, reclassified as an alien, but if you kept your head down, if you stayed underground and they didn't catch you, you were allowed to stay. At least my father did. This week in Filipino history, just a reminder of the anti-Filipino sentiment that existed in the United States, specifically Turlock, California. The Night Riders, precursors to the KKK, with baseball bats and clubs warning Filipinos to get out of town. September 17th, 1934. 86 years ago. Is it different? I mean, if you have African American friends, black friends, I'm sure this can sort of help you imagine how people must have felt in the South, anywhere in America. If you have Native American friends, how do they feel? Heard a story recently about the Trail of Tears, how people had to flee their homes, how they were racing to get out of Mississippi and toward what eventually would be their home in Oklahoma. How did they feel? Were Filipinos spared any of that? Well, we may not have had it as bad, but for the 30,000 Filipinos who were here in 1934, they experienced xenophobia. They experienced exclusion. It's part of our history. It's a sad part, not just of Filipino American history, but American history. An American history we don't often get, and maybe because it's not the most patriotic history that we could hear. But we need to know about it. And we need to know what happened to us. I want to say a few more words about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. You may have seen a number of things already on television, movies, or documentaries. A documentary, RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. If you're on social media, the memes. Everyone is taken by Ruth Bader Ginsburg now, myself included. She was just 5'1". She was taller than my mom. She's kind of like Filipino size. I never met her. That's one of my regrets. I was in D.C. at the time. I was working up on Capitol Hill at the time. And I remember I was working in radio doing a talk show on the big Washington D.C. talk station, and man, the Clarence Thomas debate, his hearings, Anita Hill, never seen a subject just light up telephone lines. And then after that, right, comes Ginsburg, and Ginsburg was something like a 96-3 vote in her favor. I mean, she was overwhelmingly supported, even though, she was not seen as necessarily a firebrand liberal. She wasn't a radical. She was really kind of a moderate. I mean, to get that super overwhelming majority to vote for her after the Clarence Thomas hearings, to see what happened to Ginsburg, you knew that she had some kind of spell or something. I mean, that she could bring people together. I mean, we need whatever it was that she has. We need, because you could see on film clips, Orrin Hatch, the senator from Utah, who was really, really conservative, and you saw how he could be reasonable and say, I'm going to support you. And everyone followed suit. We were already beginning to see gridlock, from Clarence Thomas and, during Clinton's early days. Ginsburg was the anti-gridlock. Ginsburg was a way to bring people together so that people were sane again. They saw the truth. They saw in her a 5'1" woman who didn't seem threatening, and they said, yeah, we're going to vote for you. And she had this remarkable sense of reaching across the aisles. You may have seen the stories about her, how one of her best friends on the court was Antonin Scalia, the arch conservative, a man who a lot of people just can't stand. They were friends. It says something about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was the anti-gridlock. She was the person who could bring America together. That's how important she was. And then when America and the court moved to the right, she moved from the center more to the left, and she became the dissenter. She became the person to say, well, wait a minute, you can't do that. And I mention her because as we think about her, I know how it's important. Some people say, well, could we see an Asian American or a Filipino American on the Supreme Court? Like you know the Supreme Court Justice of California. Would she be nominated, or is she not that politically connected? Or she's a Filipino. Or would you? I mean, really, I don't think there's any question. Well, Trump has said he's going to nominate a woman. But there's just something about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and what she stood for. As much as I'd like to see a Filipino American, or this is like over the last few years, as much as I'd like to see a Filipino or an Asian American mentioned as a possible member of the court, I saw in Ruth Bader Ginsburg maybe a Filipino by proxy. She represented us. She represented our concerns because she looked at the law, she looked at the situation, and she knew, just like in terms of race, how people of color, how African Americans, how we were all covered by the 14th Amendment and the Equal Protection Under the Law clause. She knew she was one of the first to see that applied to women. And in doing that, she implied how, yes, it applied to all of us, Filipinos too, as she stood up for minority rights, our voting rights, our inclusion. That's why if you're feeling something for Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I don't blame you. You should. We owe a debt of gratitude to that woman because as they were trying to shut the door on us, as they were trying to shut us out, her nickname was Kiki because she was, or Kiki, because she was a Kiki baby. She was our guardian kicker. She made sure that they couldn't shut the door on us. She made sure that we wouldn't be left out. That was her role for all these many years that she served on the court. And unfortunately, toward the end, she had to be the dissenter because too many times the majority went against us. So just a few words about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, because we know we are going to see, well, we're already seeing it. I mean, she just died on Friday. The memorials are coming in. The flags are at half staff. But the dememorialization is happening. The hypocrisy is coming out. The prejudice is coming out. All the ways to undo this great woman's legacy are beginning to happen before our eyes. And it's just amazing to see this kind of disgraceful politics occur. And it's up to us now, right? I mean, Ruth Bader Ginsburg's last wishes were for whoever gets elected to then it would be his prerogative to appoint a justice. Could be Trump, could be Biden, could be anyone. But the implication was it should be up to the people and their vote to decide. The people decide through their vote. So that's our cue. Vote. Go vote. One more final thing to mention on our website, on this, not a website, but on the FANHS museum page, I do talk about the census. If you want to be counted, you don't have to wait till November. There's still time to go out and be counted for the census, which ends at the end of the month. You don't have much time, but you can go online, go to our website or our Facebook FANHS museum page, see what I say there, click on the link to get you to the census.gov form. Be counted as a Filipino. It's important. Okay, one more this week in Filipino American history, and that is September 21st, which is tomorrow. Ferdinand Marcos declares martial law 1972. This is very important because it is the dividing line for all Filipino Americans for, well, certainly since post-65. Filipinos, of course, if you know the immigration, well, they didn't really have to immigrate in the 20s. They were nationals, right? They were American nationals. They came here. And then they were limited after 34. The limitation on the quotas on Philippine immigration stood until 1965. And then the immigration law opened it up and people started coming. Most of them started coming because of Marcos's martial law. Martial law pushed them into the United States. They wanted to escape that and come to freedom. And then once here, there was a kind of dividing line between immigrants who came post-65 who were pro-Marcos or anti-Marcos and Filipinos who were here, Filipino Americans who had come in the 30s and 40s, managed to stay in the United States, maybe even fight during World War II. They were pro-Marcos because many of them, like my father from the Ilocos Norte region, saw Marcos as their kababayan. That was quite a division that defined the Filipino American community. Stockton, where the museum is, most people tend to be from all over the Philippines, but there was a predominant community from the Visayas, as well as from, the Ilocos region, Pangasinan. But that Marcos, allegiance to Marcos defined us all. And when Marcos fell in in the late 80s, after Aquino went there, Benigno Aquino, and then Cory Aquino rose up and, people power, everything sort of, the Philippines kind of fell off the map in a way. People were looking at the Philippines, but people were they were just seeing what happened to the Philippines, how it developed. And so now we have Duterte, and there's a new hue and cry because Duterte is almost as autocratic. He's only declared partial martial law, not full martial law. And that has begun to divide people who have come here post-65, post-80, post-2000, some who have both feet, one in the U.S., one in the Philippines, and they like an autocratic president like Duterte, who takes an iron fist and rules as he sees fit, although perhaps without regard to the kind of constitutional freedoms that people assume they have in a democracy like the Philippines, which is or was or is shaped in the image of the United States. So very important that we remember that date, September 21st. Ferdinand Marcos declares martial law, 1972, because it shows, just once again, we talk about Filipino American history, but Filipino American history still always has or always is influenced somewhat by our strong ties to what they say back home to the Philippines, to the things that are going on in the Philippines, which may or may not be a deterrent to our going forward to looking at us in America. And just that divide indicates that, wow, we are split up between those of us who one eye that way, one eye going forward, whither the Filipino American. So you can imagine what happened in 1971 when some people up in Washington came up with the idea of the Far West Conference. The Far West, they call it the official title, the Young Filipino People's Far West Convention in Seattle. And it began August of 1971. August of 1970, 50 years. 50 years as of next year. So we're in the 49th year as we speak now. And it's critical because we should know a lot more about the Far West Conference, or sometimes called the Far West Convention. It's been shortened, the name is shortened. We should know about it because it's a critical point in Filipino American history and our community's history. What were we doing? What were we thinking back in 1971? Just imagine, 1965, the quotas were lifted and people were able to come to the United States in greater numbers because that immigration quota from the Philippines was lifted from some ridiculous number like 10 or 12 or something like that. And now more people were allowed to come. Some of them were fleeing Marcos. They didn't say that. It was just coincidence, but that was why. So they were coming. 1971, that's 6 years after that lifting. And some people were here, like our guest yesterday, Luna Gemero. Luna was born here. Her father came in 28. And unlike me, whose father was not able to start a family until the late 50s, Luna was up and about, and they had a family because her father married I think her father and mother came to America together. So it really helps define what the community was about, where the community was at. 1971, there were people like Luna. And Luna yesterday, if you missed her interview, catch it on the FANHS Museum page and also the FANHS YouTube page. She said, Emil, I wanted to get into this, but at the Far West Conference, that conference and subsequent conferences, there tended to be a rift between people who wanted to move the community forward and people in America and people who were looking at what was going on in the Philippines. A rift that she said caused a split in the organization and what people could do or should do. And, I was still, in those days, I was still in high school. I was not, the anti-Marcos movement did not hit me until I got to San Francisco as a reporter in 1981. It didn't really hit. Anti-Marcos sentiment was always brewing in San Francisco. And Luna mentioned Rodel Rudiz, who I'm happy to say is a friend of mine, a colleague, journalistic colleague. Riddell's a lawyer, gifted, articulate speaker. Luna attested to that. Passionate. There were a number of Filipino Americans from the Philippines who really wanted to focus on the events back there, and with good reason. The U.S. was supporting the Filipinos, or supporting Marcos, supporting that dictatorial regime. And there was a kind of awakening on all sides, not just Filipinos from there who were here now, but people on campus. People started seeing things like the Vietnam War in terms of the Philippines. They started seeing the quagmire that was Vietnam in terms of the Philippines. And it was not until the 80s, like I said, when I got to San Francisco as a reporter, I was with the NBC affiliate, that there were these massive demonstrations out at San Francisco's Union Square. And that's when people started to see, are we back in the right side? Should we even be there? Is this another Vietnam? People started seeing Marcos and calling him, the U.S. puppet. And, of course, the protest in Manila, you'd see Uncle Sam burning an effigy. Here in Union Square in San Francisco, you would see a mixed crowd of Filipinos and people who were just patriotic Americans, wondering why we were spending taxpayer dollars to prop up Marcos in the Philippines. So it was an issue. It was an issue, and who can forget the years? I mean, it was the Reagan years, the Reagan-Bush years. Bush, with his, you can look this up in Wikipedia. Bush said he honored Marcos for standing up for America's democratic values, for adhering to the democratic values that we hold dear. Paraphrase, but Bush the first said it, and it would just turn people's stomachs when they hear that, and they realized what was happening in the Philippines to press freedoms of speech, all sorts of freedom in the Philippines because of martial law. Now, just to show you how deep the division was, I remember talking to my father who was born in Ilocos Norte, right? Marcos's town or province, but also the town, saying, "Oh, Marcos, he just built the roads. He did good things for the Philippines." Never really got past that. He did good things for the Philippines. So that was where the debate was. And it wasn't until I came as a reporter looking at it objectively that I was able to do more reporting on the anti-Marcos movement. Of course, in terms of Filipino American history, leading the way wasn't just things like sentiment developed at the Far West Conference, sentiments developed by activists who were part of that. There was also the union movement, which came out of Seattle, right? We can't forget Domingo and Viernes and their struggles, their case. We can't forget Marcos, what Marcos was doing to Filipino Americans here at the time. So there were all sorts of things happening, but chronicling all these stories, the Philippine ethnic press here in the United States, be they radical publications, radical, I don't want to use that term so lightly, but, anti-Marcos, virulently anti-Marcos publications like Katipunan, or somewhat more mainstream but anti-Marcos publications like the Philippine News, which was started by Alex Esclamado, his little Filipino newspaper, South San Francisco. There was a guy, Alex Escamado. in those days, the Philippine news, the Balitang, right? The Filipino newspapers, the ethnic newspapers, were the voice of the Filipino community. Where it was a way you got news from home, I say in quotes, but news about what was going on, about Marcos and anti-Marcos, and things happening here in the community. Oh, the Optimist Club giving scholarships away. Great. Oh, and by the way, this is going on in Manila. Ang Balitang, Philippine News. And in every community, there were newspapers. We got to start a just an exhibit on Balitang, the Philippine newspapers, which really were or are the first draft of history. You pick up Don Mabalan's Little Manila's in the Heart. Who are our sources? Philippine newspapers, among them. I mean, it's not just scholars talking to each other, writing papers and saying, oh, this, and this, and this. Original sources. The original sources were the first draft of history, the Philippine newspapers. And I'm actually proud to say that one or two of my articles was footnoted by Dawn in her book. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't get deep into the footnotes to see it when she was alive. I just noticed that a few years back when I was rifling through the book. But the first draft of history, the Philippine News. In fact, that's where I met Rodel Rudiz. And that's where I met the cadre of Philippine journalists that I still have associations with. Rene Siria Cruz, the people at Filipinas Magazine, Inquirer.net. They were all here in America, almost as if an underground kind of network, overground. It's just the way the Philippine community was. So a little bit of our Philippine American history that comes out because of, when I mentioned, Marcos signing martial law, on September 21st. Well, this is what happened to our community. Or it's important because our community responded. And there were people who were against it, and there were people who raised their fist and say, yeah, go Marcos. People like my dad. It split the community. Almost in half. And if you follow what happened from 72 on, it wasn't until the 80s that I really got into the story. And 83, I first went to Manila when I covered the funeral of Benigno Aquino, the rival to Marcos, who was in exile in the United States, but then went back to the Philippines to stand his ground, to face up to Marcos, and then was gunned down on the tarmac at the Manila airport. That was the beginning of a stretch of, from 83 to 87, the third act of the martial law story. And then, of course, people power. And then the Philippine story became a Philippine story, and the Filipino American story was up to us to create and move forward. Because there are some Filipinos who did go back from the United States back to the Philippines. Oh, people power. We're going back. I think they kept their houses in Daly City, though, because, as we know from history, that dream didn't exactly work out the way things planned or the way people thought. Meanwhile, here in the United States, it's almost like we're still not quite. I mean, there aren't people with bats saying, go home Filipino, like in Turlock in 1934, 86 years ago. And there are some Filipinos still that we see in institutions. We had We had Filipinos. We have a Filipino in the state legislature in California. And correct me, I said T.J. Cox was a congressman. He's half, but we have another half or a quarter Filipino, Bobby Scott, Virginia, who is a senior Democrat. Bobby Scott. So we have two partial Filipinos. But that's where we are now in Filipino American history. So the importance of the Marcos issue when Luna Gemero, who I talked to yesterday about the Far West Conference, the Far West Convention, when she said, I wish I'd talked, she had time to talk. She did, but we didn't get to it. But she said, I wish I'd mentioned that this split did create a rift within the Far West Convention. I wish we had gone over that, because even though Luna was named, she said she was blacklisted as one of the 100 or so anti-Marcos types on the FWC. When I saw her note this morning to me, it made it sound like she didn't necessarily agree with everything that the fervent anti-Marcos people were saying. So a split. And certainly these are issues that we can talk about from here on, because it's one of the main themes or topics in the Filipino American National Historical Society. This is their theme for the next 2 years. So we should know about it. We should get to know about what happened. What were people saying? How did it really divide a community? And how do those divisions still show up to this day? People still hold grudges to their death, unfortunately. But it was a powerful thing. The Far West Conference, as you heard Luna say yesterday, did bring people together. People were able to network. There was no Facebook. There was no way that Filipinos can say, "Hey, look, you too, me too. Oh, let's do Filipino. Yeah." But there's always this enduring conflict that was made more, that the anti-Marcos, pro-Marcos thing shined a light on, between Filipinos, immigrants, and Filipinos native born. I remember when I watched my dad in groups of Filipinos who were immigrants, thinking that, well, maybe things will change in my day and we'll all be just one big happy family, right? But no, here I am. I'm at the FANHS Museum. We're talking about the thing that we lived through, the division that sort of kept a lot of us apart. So it's important to, as we go into these next years, FANHS is going to have they're going to have more panels and conversations coming up in October, Filipino American National History Month. I thought we'd have these discussions now early so people can sort of look back and check into their photo albums and see what relatives are sitting apart. Oh, there's uncle here. Oh, uncle's sitting away from that uncle. He's sitting here. And how did that impact the family dynamic? And were there relatives you didn't see all the time because they were pro-Marcos? And did they drive a better car than you? Did they live in the city? Did they live in the suburbs? Did they live out in the valley? Are the people that you just saw all the time because they were your people? I know with my father, the big conflict with him was he was a cook, a union cook, local too. He never made me forget that. And he also was very big on the vote, very big on voting. I think it had to hurt him a little bit when he saw some of the elections that Marcos waged that weren't exactly on the up and up, snap elections and all that. But Filipinos are loyal. And he was a true blue Ilocano. And maybe that's fundamentally why there are the kind of divisions that we see to this day. Provincial differences. Oh, you're from Bohol. You're from, Tarlac. You're from Pangasinan. Oh, Iloilo. And that's one of the things about being in America, that sometimes you can bridge those gaps here in America. We're American. We're American Filipinos. We're Filipino Americans. We bridge that gap. How far did we go 49 years after the Far West Conference? Now those old people, or those young people, are old. I talked to Luna yesterday, and we know we went far, but maybe not as far as we could have gone. Something to think about as we consider Filipino American history on this pop-up of Filipino American history from the Filipino American National Historical Society Museum. So if you've enjoyed our discussion, go back to the beginning. Maybe it'll change your mind. Now go back and see the other discussion we had with Luna Gemero yesterday. It's available on both on our YouTube page, FANHS Museum at YouTube, and also on our Filipino American National Historical Society Museum page. Just go to the link, and this will repeat, but also you'll see where all the Facebook videos are displayed. And that's our program for today. I thank you for joining us. Like I said, we do these things every Saturday and Sunday because I know you want to drive to Stockton. I know you want to come and see us. Believe me, we'd like to be open. Some museums are open. We'd be open if we were in Arboretum. We'd be open if we were in San Francisco. We're in Stockton. That's not a curse. It's just where it is in COVID, in the COVID land, or COVID world. We don't have the days to push us up to a better designation so we could be open. But once we are, we will be open, and you can come visit the museum. You can see our exhibits. Go to our website, FANHS Museum. Follow the clicks. You can get to our website, see some of the things we have. You can come. My goal for the museum is to have the museum serve as a public square, as a place where Filipinos can come, because what Filipinos can do is we can tell stories. We can contribute to a narrative that is lost, a narrative that no one cares about except us. And now we care about it. And now we're telling it. We're telling it here, online, on these videos, to each other, and to anyone else who wants to listen and share. Because I like to say the museum is where you are. We're closed, but the museum is where you are. Come see us. Come talk to us. And get in touch with me at filipinomuseum@gmail.com. filipinomuseum@gmail.com. That gets right to me. I set it up so it doesn't commingle with my other stuff. But yeah, filipinomuseum@gmail.com. And really, if you want to check out some of the writings I do, you can go to amok.com, or you can go to the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund .org/blog. But it is my pleasure to be here with you. to make sure that we check in on each other during this COVID pandemic and tell our stories. My name is Emil Guillermo. Thank you again for being here. Back again next Saturday, Sunday. We'll talk more about Marcos, I guess. September 21st, this week in Filipino American history. That was the day he signed martial law. We'll also see what else is in the news. Past, present, future. We'll talk about it here. This is our public square, our public rectangle, the Filipino American National Historical Society Museum. Yeah. Thanks again. If you missed any or all or part of this video, it replays right here where you're seeing it on our Facebook page. Have yourselves a great rest of the day. I'll see you again soon.